So you were just recording in progress message. Awesome. Okay, here we go. All right, so we are here to talk about leading staff wellbeing, a little bit different to some of the webinars I might have done last year. I was actually thinking this might be my first one for the year, which is kind of crazy, but I actually was thinking about what's the purpose of today and what do I want to leave you walking away with? And my honest answer is I want to leave you feeling a little bit mind blown today. I want you to walk away from this thinking, oh my goodness, that's really shifted the way I think about how wellbeing looks in schools, how I think we can approach it, what it looks like in terms of what we might be doing. Because if I can speak openly, and if you haven't attended anything I've done before, or if you haven't worked with me, you'll know that I kind of just say it how it is. This has really come about from some of the work that I've been doing, which has left me thinking this has to be driven by impact. If we really want to change staff wellbeing and culture, we have to be able to do a few things. So first of all, understand that it is long-term work, because well-being is not just about the nice, chocolates, morning teas, yoga kind of stuff. It's about who we're being, how we're feeling, and what we're doing, which means it's about people work, but it also is about systems work. It also is about structure. It's about things like emotional intelligence and understanding each other, but it's also about looking at how we manage workload, time, and productivity. There are so many different things that come into this, that what's really come to light in the beneath the surface days I do in school. So if you don't know what that is, it's a day where I collect qualitative data to help you really be informed about changes you make, is that every school is so different. And whilst there might be common themes or patterns around teachers feeling like they're time poor, or like they don't have enough support, or there aren't enough teachers in the country or the globe, I imagine, or that there are things impacting well-being, what's evident is that the things that are causing stress, overwhelm, or low well-being in a school aren't actually the same for every school, because every school is so different and unique and complex and operates differently. And there is a part of me that absolutely loves this approach, that here in Australia we have such autonomy over how schools are organised and structured, and how we spend our time, and the systems we use, and how we organise structures around things like planning, when we have assemblies, camps, all of those types of things. But in actual fact, I think some of the autonomy we have around, especially systems things, can really impact our ability to streamline what might be impacting well-being. So things like, how do we organise timetables, or what IT system do we use to be able to run meetings or to store our files? Do we use G Drive? Do we use Google? Do we use Microsoft? There are so many different approaches now we can take, but what seems to happen is that because it's not consistent across all schools, that within a school that system mightn't be clear either. And so the patterns that have stood out in regards to what's impacting staff wellbeing really highlight that it's not one thing, or it's not five things even, that are going to be transferable to every school. And so because of this, it really got me thinking about, well, what do we need? Like, what do we need to do differently? What do we need that's going to work? How can we really tackle this in a way that's going to be meaningful? And my thinking around this is that we have to start to empower those who work in our schools to understand that they drive change, more so than hiring someone like an external consultant to do the work. It's really about knowing that when we talk about well-being, it's collective responsibility. So everyone is responsible, and that it shouldn't matter if we have, yes, a leadership team driving, or we have a wellbeing committee driving it, because everyone needs to be part of that journey as well. So when we have staff turnover, which happens, it's inevitable, the change work still continues. And what I've noticed in my work over definitely the past 12 months, because we know that staff turnover is high at the moment, is that when people leave, we're also losing some of these amazing initiatives or change work that we're driving. And what that is highlighting is that there is perhaps a lack of transparency around those things. There's a lack of staff buy-in from the beginning, or there's a lack of understanding of what was going on behind the scenes. And so when we're talking about transforming culture, it's about knowing that everyone has to contribute to the work. And that's why I'm sharing this new thing with you today. But I want to highlight too around that some of the things that we have perhaps tried to do when it comes to looking at staff wellbeing culture, some of the things that have gotten in the way of the change work that we're doing, or some of the things that really haven't allowed us to make the traction we thought we would be able to make. And that is, first of all, we're looking and have been looking for those quick fixes. I even had a conversation with someone last week around, can you just tell me, 10 things I can do with my staff to improve staff wellbeing? And I'm like, sure, I could tell you 10 things, but it doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean that that quick fix is going to be right for your school. And in fact, we shouldn't be looking for quick fixes. We know that, or if you don't know, if you haven't read my book, in my book, I talk about the two different types of well-being, subjective and psychological. And we know that the psychological well-being is more around the long-term areas of fulfillment, meaning, growth. But the subjective space, the quick fixes space, the morning teas, the yoga, the things that boost those positive emotions, if we only focus there, it can be problematic for us. And they are the quick fixes. They make us feel good in the short term. But what I'm hearing more and more is that we want meaningful change that's going to tackle not just tackle the symptom, but also the cause. Yeah. And so because of that, we can't use any more quick fixes. It's just not working for us. Another thing that stands out is that there are often too many priorities. And so we want staff wellbeing to be a priority, or perhaps the number one priority. But if we have other competing priorities, it seems to be the thing that gets further and further down the list, because our job, our core business is around teaching and learning. I understand that. And if you don't know, when I worked in schools, that my background was around leading learning and pedagogy and curriculum and planning and differentiation. And I very much have a space for that. And that is now more and more combining into this space as well, because it's around systems and thinking. But often if we don't understand that, or we don't prioritize well-being as being number one, it gets dropped off. And so someone asked me on a podcast recently, if you could tell schools to do one thing to support staff well-being, what would it be? And my answer was stop. Like, if we just stopped all other initiatives for a year, and I know some of you might be gasping at that statement, but if we just stopped and continued with what we were doing, and instead made staff wellbeing the number one priority, and looked at all of the things that make up our school through the lens of, does this support, promote, or impact staff wellbeing, positively or negatively impact staff wellbeing, then we'd be able to actually make some meaningful change and drive some meaningful action. But when we're looking at things like improving literacy outcomes or student behaviour or whatever else that might be, and they are the priorities, and we're doing PD around those things, professional development around those things, staff meetings are dedicated to those things, staff wellbeing becomes lower and lower and lower. And, if we don't pause and really give this the time it needs, then we're not going to be able to create change. We're not going to be able to have impact. And that covers that competing and conflicting priorities as well. We've really got to decide, hey, what is the priority here? What are we going to focus on? And how are we going to do that? Because often what tends to happen is we say we're focusing on staff wellbeing and we set to work, but what we realize is people don't know what they need to know about this. And this is where some tension starts to lie in this change worker for schools, because they say staff wellbeing is a priority. And for some, they think it's about, well, I should just have more free time, or I should work less, or I should never feel stressed. But actually, that's not what wellbeing is. Wellbeing is around ensuring that we support both subjective and psychological aspects of who we are. But also, there's a wonderful definition I have in my book as well from the World Health Organization, which I think really supports what wellbeing is for the workplace and for schools. And it talks about how, first of all, wellbeing sees us use our natural abilities, so working towards our strengths. It supports us to manage everyday stress, which is just like, whoa, what is everyday stress in a school environment? And are we aware of these stresses? How do we manage them? It also highlights the need to work productively. So when we feel like our well-being is where it should be, we work productively and we're engaged in our community, which in the school sense is, we're engaged in our teams and the work that we do. And so if we only view well-being as about being never stressed, happy all the time, and doing less work, we don't really understand it. And we don't know that, because we only have that one view or that one perception. So we have to be able to really expand our thinking. And for some, that might mean putting down our own agenda, which can be really hard, especially when we have schools that have leaders in different positions with different agendas. And we have literacy leaders or numeracy leaders or behavior leaders, and I'm using general terms here, they may not be names of people in your school, but leaders of innovation or leaders of learning and teaching. And we have all of these different roles in the school, and what we say to them is, you need to drive change in your space. You need to have an improvement agenda for your role. And yes, that does need to happen, but what if their improvement agenda was to consider how the work they did impacted staff wellbeing? What if that was their agenda for a year? To consider their systems, their structures, their processes, the tasks they were getting staff to do, the productivity and efficiency of the way they worked. How does that impact staff wellbeing individually, collectively, as a whole staff? But that doesn't happen when we have a lack of vision or no clear direction, and we're doing bits and pieces of things. So we really have to be able to say, this is our vision for staff wellbeing. We have to be able to know what it is for us. Now, I just shared with you the World Health Organization definition, great, but that mightn't be enough for your school space or for your context. In fact, you might need to draw upon other things. Maybe you're an independent school and you're underpinned by a spiritual belief. Maybe you're an Anglican school or a Catholic school or an ERA school, or maybe you're an IB school and you need to draw on some IB or PYP language. All of that's okay. It's about contextualizing and understanding that definition for yourself, so you have that clear vision and know where to go. But ultimately what happens is we need to be okay with understanding that, yes, we need to collaborate. Yes, there needs to be autonomy over choice, but at some point there will also need to be a final decision. And sometimes that can be really hard to sit within the wellbeing space, because decisions that are made aren't necessarily the decisions that we may personally want. And this is why having a clear vision for your school, so a definition of wellbeing, and this is where we're going, matters first. Because otherwise it's like, oh, we're going to work on staff wellbeing, it's a priority, and people are left to assume what that is. And I've gone into schools many times and said to staff, what is your definition of wellbeing? And every person will have a different definition, which means every person has a different vision about where the school should head if it's a priority. Every person will have a different idea about the changes that need to take place. Every person will have a different idea about what the end goal is. And that means when we're collaborating and when we're telling people they have autonomy around some of the changes that might be made, but then a final decision has to be made, it can cause this tension. And so we want to be really clear that this is the vision, this is where we're going as a whole staff.
Say what? No idea. I don't have a number. Lana.
I'll just mute that person. And this is why if you don't have a really clear vision, then you're going to have that little bit of tension. And so you want to be able to ensure that you build that foundation piece first. I'm just going to have a sip of my tea, so feel free to pop a question or anything in the box if you have any, or a comment. Otherwise I'll keep going. So where are we going? It's a great question, right? What is the vision? Where do we go with this? We're all talking about staff wellbeing. We're all talking about the need for it to be better, for the need for it to change. Perhaps this is the thing that's going to solve teachers leaving the profession. I mean, I do think that in some ways, this is definitely part of the answer. So there are 3 things I'm going to share with you here that are actually about thriving workplaces or thriving schools. Is there a difference between quick wins and quick fixes? So I would think that quick wins, this is my own interpretation, quick wins are things that you can do quickly that allow people to see there's movement happening, and quick fixes are band-aid solutions. So quick wins might be something like, oh, we actually, I'll give you an example. So our secondary school I have been working with, they use internal cover to for when teachers are absent to make up their hours. It's a really great system. But the staff identified that it can actually impact their nervous system or their ability to plan, because they never know if they're going to have that session off or not. And so they said, it'd be so great if once a week we could lock down a session and say we couldn't be used for a cover during that time. And we're like, that's actually a great strategy. That's a really quick win. We can do that. It's effective. It's meaningful. It's not addressing the symptom of, I just feel like I'm always being pulled here and there. It's actually addressing more of the cause of, I feel like I can't plan and I'm being pulled away and my time's not my own. I don't have autonomy. That was a really quick win. Quick fix is something like a Band-Aid solution that isn't long-term and sustainable. So quick fix in that scenario could have been something like no one gets covers on a Monday. But actually, is that really sustainable? Because you could have 10 staff out on a Monday. And so it's about thinking through the long-term solution. What's sustainable, what matters, and what can we do to actually address the cause, not just the symptom. And so in that space, if teachers were feeling, their symptom might have been stressed or I couldn't get organized, the solution could have been, well, I'll just give you more time. Well, actually, they don't want more time. They want to know that they've got spare time, that spare piece of time designated already, so they can plan for it in advance. Does that help? Yeah, cool. Getting a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. All right. These 3 things, which you would have had time to read by now. Cool. So we are not just talking about improving staff wellbeing in this space. We're actually talking about staff wellbeing being a component. We're talking about meaningful work being a component, and we're talking about organizational culture being a component, which means I probably could have called this webinar How to Develop Thriving Workplaces in Schools, but I didn't. So that's a bonus for you. But what I am going to show you next is how these 3 things go together to build that thriving workplace, which actually is staff wellbeing and culture, I promise. So what we're really talking about here is being, doing, and feeling. So when we understand that staff wellbeing is about subjective and psychological wellbeing, it's about aspects of work-life balance, it's about meaning and purpose and those things that really drive our ability to feel engaged in the work that we do. And we understand that it links to organizational culture. So who we are being as an organization. Who are we? What are our values? What are our beliefs? What are our actions? Will I send out the PowerPoint slide? You'll get the recording. Yeah. If you desperately need this, take a screenshot of it. Or if you do want it, I can try and attach it. Yeah. And when we think about meaningful work, it's like, does the work I'm doing matter? Does this task actually add meaning and value to my life or to the work that I do? Now, there are some tasks that I am hearing are meaningless, like having to do risk assessments for excursions, or having to attend some meetings, or having to do, emails to parents. But these are, sorry, I'm just getting a notification. These are meaningful tasks. We have to do risk assessments for excursions. It's about ensuring our students are safe. We have to clean up our inbox. That actually reduces stress and makes us understand that we're on top of certain things and have the right information. So even though we may feel like some of those tasks are meaningless, they just mightn't fulfill us in the same way as our values. And so we have to be really clear about those things. But then when we combine these elements is where the magic happens. So when we're combining staff wellbeing and organizational culture, what we're addressing here actually is who we're being as a staff. What are our values, beliefs, actions, behaviors, and environment that allow us to really thrive? When we're combining staff wellbeing and meaningful work, we're considering the mental, physical, and emotional health of our staff. We're considering psychological safety, or psychosocial workplace hazards that have just come out now. We're considering the engagement, autonomy, and growth of staff. And when we look at the doing aspect, we're saying, hey, what are our methodologies here? What's our approach? What are our approaches? What's our pedagogy? Are we looking at productivity? Are we looking at system structures and processes that underpin our organization, but also lead to meaningful work? So I actually haven't shared this in a public space yet. I'm writing a second book, a follow-up, more around this type of work. So you're my first audience who gets to see this. I haven't even put it on LinkedIn, which is where I normally put everything. But I'd be really keen to ask you, like, does that help to understand how staff wellbeing and culture and the work we do all meld together? Staff wellbeing is not just about doing those nice things. It's not about making sure that we have morning teas and fruit bowls and social events, although those things do matter. It's about understanding that we engage in meaningful work, which really is our methodologies, approaches, pedagogy, how we work, systems and structures. And then the being piece are those alongside the organizational culture aspects. Because I think sometimes we think staff wellbeing sits outside of the work we do or our culture, but actually it's all of it. This is what we're talking about when we say thriving workplaces or thriving schools or thriving wellbeing. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes work we do doesn't always feel like it's meaningful, but it has meaning to the work we're doing. Yeah, it's a different distinction. Doesn't mean we always enjoy it. I can tell you right now, my inbox is actually, I was going to say overflowing, but that's like an understatement for how it's functioning. It's very full. And I am putting it off because it's one of those tasks no one likes doing, and I'm normally much better at it, but I've just been a little bit busy. And I'm so busy, and which means I've decided to leave that as a not urgent task. I've replied to everything that needs to be replied to, but I haven't sorted through and filtered them. And it would be very easy for me to say, well, it's just not meaningful, it's not fulfilling. But in actual fact, when I go through that process, the meaning and fulfillment comes from knowing that I'm organized, that I've responded to everything, that I'm on top of the work that I need to do. So meaning doesn't always lie in the task, it lies in the outcome of the task. And we have to be able to go through those thinking processes to see that. Okay, so how do we drive change? I'm also going to share something very new with you, which is kind of exciting because I've had this on my whiteboard. I've had it in multiple places. My notepads all kind of been thinking about it for probably 6 months. Meaning lies in the outcome of the task, yeah. So I'm going to share with you a change process, which I said I'd be talking about. I'm going to share with you the 5 I's of change, which I'm pretty excited to do, because this is how we get transformation, embedded change, and sustainability in the areas of well-being, culture, and the work that we do, yeah? It accommodates construction. Yeah, awesome, thanks. So here we go. First of all, we start with identify. I haven't put numbers on them, I just realized, but identify, ideate, implement, integrate, and innovate. And there are 2 that I'm going to unpack for you this afternoon in a little bit more detail. But we have to start with identifying what is happening in the space of wellbeing and culture in our school. Because for many, we can think, oh, staff wellbeing is low, or we might hear a whisper of it, or someone says it to us. And we think, oh, let's do some things, yeah? So if you've read my book or you've attended one of my webinars before, you would have heard me talk about how wellbeing is not what we do. It's actually a combination of how we want to feel and who we want to be, and that informs what we do. But it's so easy to get caught in this doing space. And as schools, we're so consumed with doing. And what we need to actually do is pause and say, well, what are the things here that we've identified that we need to do something about? And staff wellbeing is too broad a term. Staff wellbeing is just too big and complex and abstract and means different things to different people. So under identify, we have to collect some really meaningful data, qualitative and quantitative. Yes, we can do surveys, but there's also some magic that lies in qualitative data, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. We then need to ideate. And this, I think, is exciting, because when we ideate, what we're doing is we're saying, well, what are all the ideas? What are the possible solutions? What could we actually do about some of these things? And I am suggesting that we don't just do this in a leadership team or a wellbeing committee. We ask all staff, what are some of the solutions? What are the recommendations? What are the suggestions? What are the dream big things we could do? Because if we really want to change what this looks like, school settings and system-wide, we have to be prepared to dream a lot bigger than we normally do. Let's all, know what happens in the ACT when we dream big about pay rises, yeah? Let's dream big with things we can change. Because if we don't dream big, if we don't throw out ideas, and if we don't actually have time to consider what these ideas might be, then we're going to just rush to the first thing that comes to mind. And it mightn't be the best thing, or it mightn't be the most informed thing, or it mightn't be right for us right now. So the ideation process alone requires time and space. And this doesn't align with the need for a quick fix, because we've got to give ourselves the opportunity to think and consider and ask, what would happen if we did that? What would happen if we didn't do that? What would happen if we did this and not that? It's weighing up the possible solutions and ideas. And then we need to implement. Now, implement is also a long step, and there are things that need to happen in between. Once we've got our ideas and we know what we're doing, we need to actually have an action plan in there. We need to consider timeframes, who's responsible for what. We need to consider what are some of the goals and things we'd be looking for, or the benchmarks. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen. We need to implement something. But the next step is crucial, because this allows us to know if what we're doing actually has worked, has meaning and traction. We need to just integrate the change. We need to integrate the change for a good 12 to 18 months. So if we're changing up the way teams plan in terms of a structure around timetables and reorganizing our timetables so teams are off at the same time, we need to integrate that and leave it alone for 12 to 18 months, because there are other layers that exist in that change that we need to allow time to take care of as well. How do these teams work? What are the parameters? What will it look like? And often in schools, we take something like reading, for example, so common, and I've led this in many schools. We think, our reading data's low. Let's get a new online reading program. Let's use, I won't name any, but let's use this ABC. And so we get ABC and we use it for like a year, but not really properly, because we're still transitioning out the old one and then bringing in the new one. And after 12 to 18 months, we're like, this isn't working. We'll just get a new thing. But in actual fact, we haven't given it time to integrate. We haven't given it time to really integrate and do its job. We didn't phase out the old one. So phasing out something else and bringing in something new at the same time, that's not integration. That's just transition period. So once we implement and go through transition, we then need to integrate. And that means stand back. That means let the thing do its thing. That means time and space to see how it actually goes. Now, in the integration space, there's going to be some teething issues. There's going to be some, I don't like this. This is different. I don't think this is working. Because as humans, we're naturally designed to find fault. That's just what we're going to do. I liked it the old way. I knew the old way. I was safe in the old space. That made me feel good. I feel like I don't have control now, so I don't like it. I want it to change back. That's all normal human behavior when we're going through a change process. It's like, if you change gyms, you're like, I don't really like this gym. I don't know where any of the equipment is. I liked my old gym better. I knew the people at my old gym. I knew the front desk. Maybe I should have just stayed at the old gym. But actually, no, you're just going through a transition or a teething period, and you need to let the new one settle and the old one phase out, and then integrate it into your life. That's just personal experience, because I've joined a new gym recently and there were some thoughts in my mind this morning, but I know that that's what's happening. And then after we integrate something, we can innovate on it. We can say, okay, we've got this. Like, this is working really good here. I can see how this change has helped. We've changed these structures around planning. Our staff are saying they have more time and space. Do we need to innovate on this? Do we need to take it one step further? Do we need to tweak it again? Do we need to change it? And if not, awesome. Maybe we go back to identifier. Maybe we just stay here for a little bit. Maybe we collect some data and see what it says. This is the change process that allows us to create embedded change, transformation, and do it sustainably. This is not quick fix change work. This is not, let's just put on an afternoon tea and cancel a meeting and get a yoga teacher in. This is actually around looking at all of these key things. What does the data tell us about this? Do we even have these things established? Do we have values, beliefs, and actions and behaviors that support the environment we're trying to create? Are we aware and do we know of what these things look like and how we're feeling as a staff? And what are we doing to support that in terms of system structures and processes? Or are they actually impacting it in a way that doesn't allow these two things to thrive? So that's the 5I change process that I wanted to share with you in regards to how we need to look at this differently, how we need to understand that staff wellbeing is a long-term change process, like we do with some things, but in actual fact, I think it's a little bit slower. And I am certainly not one to say, well, change processes in schools are slow. That's just how they are. There's always something we can be doing and working on. I think the phrase schools move slowly is not helpful in this space. It's not about moving slowly. It's about giving things time and space to integrate. And there's a difference there. So I want to unpack 2 more of these before I give you time to ask any questions on that. The first is we need to use data that matters. So when we're talking about identify, we need to use quantitative and qualitative data. I really just had to think in my head which one's which, because when I was in high school, I couldn't remember. My high school teacher taught me quantitative has an N in it, and N means numbers, and qualitative has an L, and L for quality, learners, people. That's how my brain just worked then. So we need the numbers, right? We need the numbers, as my wonderful friend Selena Fisk's book says. I'm not a numbers person, the title of it, that's me. But we need them. We need to know the numbers because sometimes we just need to be able to have that data. And there's lots of wellbeing tools out there that allow us to capture that. And you as a school, you might do the People at Work survey, you might have an in-house one that you do. And we also know there's a plethora of surveys available right now, which is great. But just be really discerning about, does it give you the information you actually want to capture? And what integrity does that come with? And also, does it come with any training around understanding the language used? Because as I've mentioned, things like burnout, well-being, stress, workload, they're all open for interpretation, which is why the qualitative data really matters. And so this is not what we don't do a lot of this. And I think we need to do more of this. So one thing that I do in my workspace is I run these days I call beneath the surface, and it is designed to go beneath the surface of the numbers. Because when we have a statistic like 40% of staff report poor or low well-being, or 70% of staff report high levels of stress most of the time, that's, they're not great statistics, but what is sitting behind the numbers? What is causing that? Because this is the difference between symptom and cause. If we look at 40% of staff have low well-being, or 70% of staff experience high stress, we're going to want to go, let's work on stress management strategies. Let's work on understanding stress. Let's work on building resilience to help combat stress. Low well-being. Well, let's work on strategies that boost well-being, mental, physical, social, emotional well-being. Let's do some PERMA. Let's do some of that stuff. Now, those things are very valuable and very much needed, and we need to do that. But what we actually need to do is be curious about what sits beneath the surface of the numbers, what sits behind that. We need to go, well, if 70% of staff are feeling stressed, what is causing that stress in this context? Because every school is different. If 40% of staff report low well-being, what is causing that? And so what I do is I run qualitative data days to be able to go beneath the surface of the numbers, ask staff. And to do that, we need to really build a culture of speaking and seeking, because we can't identify what is actually causing low well-being or poor stress or anything like that if we don't go beneath the surface, if we don't start to ask ourselves, what are the tangible things? So we need to be really specific and really granular on what those things are in order to change them, which is why when I see headlines like 85% of staff are reporting that workload is too high, or 95% of teachers are leaving because they're stressed, whatever it might be. No, it's not 95% are leaving, that was an exaggeration, but something like that. It makes me think we have to be really mindful of language like that and words like that, or people leaving on a Friday saying they're burnt out. We have to be really careful with those words, because they actually have a definition and a meaning, which I'm not going to unpack now. And we are perhaps using them not in the right way. And we're also not using them in a way that empowers us to take responsibility for some of those things in terms of individual and collective responsibility. So what is impacting burnout? What might make you feel like that? What is impacting workload? What are those things? We have to be really specific, because if we can't name it, we can't change it. And if we don't have an environment of speaking and seeking out that data and that information, we're left guessing. We're just left guessing. And so we have to build a culture, which is everyone's responsibility, of speaking up about things that might be impacting well-being and seeking those things out. Now, here's something I want you to think about. when you were last involved in a conversation that perhaps wasn't positive, that was perhaps around, oh, I'm just feeling really stressed, or, oh, these things are too much, or, oh my goodness, this is just keeping me up at night. We might perceive that to be some kind of whinging negative conversation, but there is so much data in that. There is so much valuable data in these conversations we're having in the staff room, in the corridor, before class, after class, about what's making us tired, stressed, and overwhelmed, that actually, if we listen for patterns, we're going to find things we need to change. But what we want to do is remove it from those corridor conversations, whispers, etc., into proactive spaces that say, actually, this has been an ongoing issue for me for some time now. This is causing me quite a lot of stress. This happened, and I don't think it's something we can sustain. Because what I hear a lot of when I run these days is teachers openly sharing things to me that are causing impact and stress, which are absolutely valuable. But when I ask the question, have you spoken up about this? Have you shared this with anyone, like a leader or a mentor or someone who can help? The answer is often no. I told my colleague, I told my teaching partner. Have you told anyone who, can help drive some change here? And the answer more often than not is no. And this is on both of us, or, this is on everyone. Teacher or leader, we all have to speak up and seek out, because that qualitative data is essential to creating change and transformation. It's so important we seek what sits below 70% of staff are experiencing stress, so we can address the cause, not the symptom. Like I've said that a lot. But there's that wonderful saying, we've got to stop just pulling people out of stream and start looking at why they're falling in the first place. We really need to stop pulling people out with stress management strategies and increasing physical well-being through walking clubs or putting on morning teas, and actually say, well, why are they falling in the first place? Now, of course, some of those reasons are around like acute stress that we can all manage, or tolerable stress, like we can tolerate it for short periods of time. But when it becomes acute or toxic, we actually need to be like, whoa, hang on here. Let's really start to look at what's causing this rather than addressing the symptom. So I'm going to pause for a minute before I move just into the last piece. But does anyone have any questions or comments around this framework or anything they want to ask? Or comment or share back? Okay, so I'm going to talk about these things. I feel like we know this, yeah? We know why we need to focus on wellbeing and culture in schools. We know that it's going to lead to improved job satisfaction if we address the cause, not symptoms. Yeah, proactive versus reactive, totally. We have to be proactive about some of this. And we are in a very reactive space in schools. In fact, I was talking to someone about this only today, but it's come up a few times, so I might have to do a podcast about it. In schools, we operate in such a reactive space, and we need to, remember at the start I was saying, what if we just paused for a year and started to look at system structures, etc., that actually help wellbeing? We could move into a more proactive state. We need to actually allow ourselves to say, well, hang on, what are some of these things we can do in a way that's proactive, efficient, and effective that we're not doing? That means we're not going to be as reactive. Sorry, I just missed that. Why? Yeah, we got to look at why it's happening, not just cleaning up the mess. Yeah, awesome. Thanks. We want to increase retention rates because the teacher shortage is real. We knew it was coming. This week and say qualitatively, I'm hearing staff say they don't feel safe to speak up. I actually couldn't imagine a safer school to work in. What can I make speaking up accessible? I would ask, what parameters do you have around that in terms of so often what schools will say is, yeah, we have an open door policy. Okay, that's great, but that requires time and things on people's parts. But what structures do you have around having those conversations? And I would suggest doing those not in whole staff. So some staff, that can be quite overwhelming, but those small group intimate conversations, if you have team meetings, often that's the best place to do it. Sitting in a circle without a table, non-threatening environment, and you go first. We're going to talk about things that are really impacting our stress levels. this is one of the things I want to share. This is what I've noticed. I know at the moment our assessment schedule has a lot on it, and I feel like that's an added stress and pressure, and we need to review it. Be open and honest with them. Sometimes we need to model those things like we do for students. We have to model them, yeah? We know that if we're going to look at wellbeing and culture, we're going to have better collaboration and teamwork, reduce stress and burnout. It again provides that positive role modeling for students or increased job performance, communication, outcomes, higher staff morale, all of the things. IPLs give teachers individual voices for their growth and wellbeing. Yeah, if you have individual professional learning plans, not every school does. And so sometimes this actually comes out of the beneath the surface data that staff don't have that opportunity to engage in those. And sometimes what's great actually at the moment is some schools are specifically allowing staff to have wellbeing professional learning plan goals. So that's a really cool thing too. So this is about laying the foundation in a change process. It's like preparing the fertile soil before planting a garden, right? You have to do the foundation work first. So what I'm going to share with you now is a new approach. This new approach I want you to consider when it comes to transforming staff wellbeing. And if you haven't looked at the PDF or if you haven't jumped on the website, what this is, oh, I don't know why that's a video. What this is leading staff wellbeing. It's an opportunity to be involved in a 12-month guided inquiry process to promote and elevate staff wellbeing and culture with bespoke mentorship to develop those people driving the change whilst creating long-term sustainable change for everyone. It's so important that we do the foundation and we do the work of this well. So what we're going to uncover over the 12-month period, first of all, is what is wellbeing to you as a school and a staff? What does it look like now? And what can you do to improve or change? Where do you want to go with this? There are 8 modules over 12 months. So this is a bit like school consultancy traditional offers, but as I mentioned in the start, I think it's time we looked at doing these things differently. Yes, I speak on wellbeing. Yes, I do PD. I know some of you here have spoken at your school. Awesome. Thanks for having me. I love it. I love speaking and I love coming in and connecting with teachers. But we need to look at approaches now that are about empowering leaders. And when I say leaders, anyone, not just those in a leadership role, but leaders of this work of wellbeing, teaching staff, wellbeing committees, leadership teams, whomever it might be that's driving change. This is about empowering them to feel like they can do this work, because ultimately I don't work in every school forever and ever. That's not my dream plan. I'm one person, but what I can do is support you to do the work. And in actual fact, I think that's far more powerful and impactful. Staff wellbeing is staff driven and staff led work. Yeah, staff wellbeing is staff driven and staff led work. So 8 modules over 12 months to empower you to do the work that's needed. You can see it in the PDF, but I've got them here anyway, because I wanted to talk about how it looks. So really it's around going through these 4 modules across the first semester, which actually we're starting term 3. So what is wellbeing in your school? Creating a wellbeing definition and a wellbeing division. Understanding those things around emotional intelligence that you need, because the work of wellbeing is people work. It is people work. So we need to understand other people's emotions, our own emotions, emotional leadership, really stepping through the 5I change process in a lot of detail. And then also, how do we build and foster that speak and seek environment and community? So talking about systems and structures around that, talking about any resistance factors that might come up, talking about what you need to do with the whole staff, because this process is not just for a group of people to sit in and consume PD. It actually is 2 PDs, half days, a term, but then also within that term, 3 checkpoints, because you'll notice down on the right-hand side here that each term there's some commitments that all staff need to be involved in, because it's everyone's work. So it's no good you just doing some PD with me and then thinking what happens now. I'm going to guide you through that process. Isn't staff wellbeing also led by leadership? Staff wellbeing is led by everyone. And often there is a perception that it's leadership's responsibility. So what I'm going to say to that is, because those in leadership roles have the ability to make decisions around change, that sits with them. But when there are system structures or processes or things that need shifting, or culture, or how we're showing up and who we're being, building that culture of speak and seek, that is led by everyone, and that is everyone's responsibility. Of course, there is an element that leadership lead in that space, but it's not one person or one team's job to lead alone. Everyone plays a role. So I wasn't excluding leadership from that. I'm saying everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean leadership too. Yeah. Sorry. So the topics, the descriptions of what's in those, but because this is the work of everyone, so collective responsibility, throughout the 12 months, there are things to do with staff. So the first one's around, defining that well-being and taking it back to staff and sharing it with them so they can see that, oh yeah, there is change, there is the journey. Then in the next, and building that foundation, the next term, we want to capture some data. So this might be you running a beneath the surface day with your staff and collecting that qualitative data, and I'll be teaching you how to do that. But I also am a certified practitioner for the work on wellbeing assessment, which is an evidence-based positive psychology research-backed wellbeing assessment tool that looks at individual and collective approaches to wellbeing. You can break it down in teams, organizations, a whole bunch of different ways. It's I would just say it's the best wellbeing tool out there in terms of looking at staff wellbeing. I looked at many and I get asked to look at a lot all of the time. And this one, it just has the rigor and the research behind it, and also the ability to be able to break it down in such meaningful ways, as well as bring out suggestions that it actually allows us to do some real great work with it. In the second semester, we're looking at how to interpret that data. We're ideating and considering different strategies. And then that's where we give that report back to staff to get them to read, review, or discuss, and to ideate with us. And then following that, we consider our action plan, who's going to do what that looks like, strategies, solutions, etc. And that is 12 months. And I know that might feel like, we haven't done much, but we've established a vision and where we want to head. We've built our capacity as those leading this change process. We've brought staff with us along the way. They've been involved in reflecting some of that. We've got some data collection. We've interpreted it. We've fed it back. We've summarized it. We've ideated with that. We've looked at different strategies, and now we're considering where to go. Now, of course, alongside this, there might be some quick wins and things that we can implement along with some PD. So in this 12 months, there will also be a library of, oh my God, to the next slide. There'll be a library of resources that you can access, that you can share with all staff, that you can use to be able to educate them along the way. There'll be a pre-recorded wellbeing reset PD. It will be a condensed version that you can use with staff, but it will definitely be there. Support via email, 3 check-in points a term, as well as, there we go. As well as professional learnings and readings you can do with staff, as well as the team along the way. So it really is that guided inquiry into where is your school in regards to wellbeing, where is it you want to head, and how do we do that in a data-informed way that allows staff to be involved in that journey at the same time. There are some prerequisites though, and this is something that I think we need to be really mindful of when we're stepping into a space of working on something like this. So I want you to get the most out of this opportunity, and I want you to be able to feel like, yeah, that was impactful, and look at what we're doing, and we're shifting culture here, and this is great, and we're actually addressing wellbeing in a way that's meaningful for us. So it's not a course or a PD event. I want to be really clear. It's an ongoing guided inquiry that you have to commit and participate to and take action with. So you must be prepared to give up 2 to 3 20-minute or staff meeting times a term to be able to do some of those things. This is our vision. Can we get feedback on it? We need some data. We're going to run a speak and seek session, all of those things, which of course I will do all training videos for. You'll be able to play with staff as well. You must be given time as a team to do the work, which means you might want to run it as a PLC or a COP or as an action team meeting, whatever it is you have in your school. But in order to drive that change process and transformation, it needs to exist. And your staff have to be ready to do the work. So you have to go to your staff and say, hey, I think we're going to do this thing. What does everyone think? It's going to involve these action items and these outcomes. It's going to involve these areas of focus. Is everyone on board? knowing that sometimes we might get a few who aren't, but we want majority of staff involved. And then all staff must be willing to undertake the work on wellbeing assessment if you choose to do it. And leadership teams as well need to be really on board, because sometimes these things are driven by other staff, and so there has to be full support, because there'll need to be some action items that have to take place in timeframes to maximize the course and the mentorship that is gone through. So the biggest thing I want you to understand is that this is not a course or a PD. It's a guided inquiry. So imagine it like I am there mentoring you along the way through this change process. 2 half days a term of professional development in this space, and then 3 drop-in sessions. So they're drop-in mentoring sessions. You can come for 1, 2, or 3. You can come for part of the time or all. They're at different times during the day to allow you to be able to work that in around whatever's happening in your school. But this is very much around driving that long-term change, so that you get out of it what you need, so that you get to do the work, so that it's contextualized, so that it's bespoke to your school, and so that the transformation is driven by everyone, not just one person or one team or me. Because, wellbeing is everyone's work. It's what everyone does. Now, it's right on 5 o'clock, and I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to. I feel like some people have jumped in their car, because I just got a few requests to come in, and I'm like, you wouldn't be joining now. But I'm just going to see if I can pop in the chat box for you the PDF, so you can download that. Which is it here. So I'm going to see if I can put the PDF into the chat box, and you can just, there we go. So you can download that now if you want to take it and have a look. But otherwise, so it's loading. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for a whole hour. I really appreciate it. I know there's lots going on in schools, and it's late in the evening, and we have a lot going on. But if you have any questions, I'm cool to hang. I've got nothing else. And before some of you start to jump off, if you are interested in joining the Leading Staff Wellbeing Guided Inquiry, we're starting term 3 on my website. I'll just pop that in the chat box as well. That you can get the form there as well. There we go. You'll see, awesome, thank you. You'll see the Leading Staff Wellbeing at the tab at the top. You'll be able to find it. There's an application form there, so you can fill that in, or just email me. There's my email there. How can we determine sensitively whether staff unhappiness or distress is due to the workplace or an outside trauma? Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the reasons I run Wellbeing Reset PDs is to establish that our wellbeing is impacted by multiple aspects of our life. However, in the workplace, we can only control things in the workplace. So we can only control the parameters of our school environment. If someone is experiencing something outside of the workplace, they have to consider whether or not they want to disclose that. We can't make someone disclose that. But what I share is that sometimes we're going to have personal things that happen to us that are going to impact our well-being and perhaps our ability to work. And we need to decide whether or not we want to share. And we might only want to do that with one person or our intimate team. But what we need to be aware of as individuals is if what's happening outside of the workplace is impacting our ability to work. And it might be. And so what I encourage people to do when they're setting up Speak and Seek is also give people permission to say things like, I'm experiencing some stuff outside of work. I don't want to talk about it, but it's going to impact how I show up for a few days or maybe longer, or it's going to impact how I work. Or if you feel like something is happening and you're not able to meet your daily responsibilities and tasks, then it is up to the person experiencing that to take responsibility and share. And you can never force someone to disclose, but to say, there's something going on for me. I'm not able to meet A, B, C, D, E deadlines. I need some support. It's tricky. It's complicated. But there are things we need to give people permission to be able to say and access. That being said, if it's something that's going on in the workplace, we want to know about it because we can change it. Does that answer that question? Just let me know if you have anything else around that. What's my definition of staff wellbeing? My definition of staff wellbeing isn't so much a definition, but I have a framework in my book. I don't know if you've seen it, and I talk about staff wellbeing having two different areas: everyday and workplace wellbeing. And in our everyday wellbeing, we want to consider energy and function, resilience, and emotional regulation, which ultimately stems from mind, body, and soul. So our mind and our mental health is resilience, our soul and our emotional health is emotional regulation, and our body, our physical health, is energy and function. So that's the everyday aspect, and that really is individual responsibility and self-efficacy. There's nothing there that someone else can do for you. We have to do that for ourselves. And then under workplace, I talk about productivity, engagement, and performance and growth. So how does our workplace support us to be productive, engaged in the work that we do, and have a sense of performing to a standard of excellence with growth? Because the research would tell us that workplaces that do those things well are able to retain staff, and they have low staff turnover. So we want to be able to consider those three things, and that's collective responsibility and collective efficacy that drives those two things. And that's why things like speak and seek, or getting staff to share, is really about considering what are the things that are impacting productivity, engagement, and performance and growth. So that's how I define staff wellbeing. That's not how I define my personal wellbeing, but that's that. You're welcome. Thanks, Narelle. Thanks, Donna. I'm glad that helped. Thank you. Thanks, Charmaine. To be had at your workplace. Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. I hope you're not leaving going, oh, mind blowing, because that was, my intention of today. Thanks. Yes. You have a great week too. I know. I can't believe it's, only Monday. Yeah. I'm excited too. I'm excited for a few reasons. One, I love this work. Two, I'm so glad that I've been talking about this for 9 years and everyone else is caught up. So if you don't know, I've been going on about this since 2014. And here we are. I'm so glad I didn't listen to people that told me not to do this work. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Michael. But I'm also excited because I think it's time we started looking at how schools drive change differently. And I'm aware that I run a business as a consultant, and that's the work I do now. But I think we need to really consider the consultancy partnerships we step into and ask ourselves, what support do we get, but how does that drive long-term change for everyone involved in terms of the work we're doing on the ground? Which means there needs to be an element of ensuring that, yes, we have people driving it. Yes, there are touch points for mentoring and consultation and consideration, but yes, there are also expectations around what all staff do, because one day PDs don't work, or one day a term doesn't work. It's not enough. It doesn't allow us to be flexible or adaptable or get the mentoring we need, or to shift or change. And we want impact, right? We want impact. We can't afford to not consider these things when we're thinking, what do we focus on? We need impact, we need change, we need results, but we also need to do it in a way that says it's not about having all of the answers. It's about understanding where you are, how to analyze that and respond to it so that you can do it all the time. By all the time, I mean every couple of years, remember, because you got to integrate stuff. But that, yeah, I'm excited. Okay. Yeah, take those ideas back to your school, Emily. It's a conversation you've got to have, yeah? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. If you need to go and do something exciting with your life, please go and do that. If you have any questions or you want to hang around, I've got like a third of a cup of tea left, so we're good until it's empty. Thank you. Okay. Giving me some insight into how I can support staff in my role at your trainee educational psychologist. Amazing. A systemic approach will be beneficial. How can we expect children and young people to regulate it if staff are finding it stressful? Yeah, oh, so true. And this is why I have a little bit of a pain point around, we ask staff to teach things like emotional regulation and resilience to students, but they actually don't understand themselves. They don't model it. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do those things. And so there's a huge gap between the education agenda around student wellbeing and staff wellbeing. Because, I'm 38. I was not taught how to regulate emotions. I was taught that, only sooks cry, and, sometimes it's good to have a fight with someone. What kind of healthy information is that? So, well, that yelling is the only way, like the louder person wins. So many unhelpful things. And now we have people my age, older, or even younger who are expected to do this, but perhaps weren't exposed to it themselves. So yeah, I would say there's a gap there. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, lovely people. I got to go do something about my cat. He's at my feet, but I hope you got the PDF. If you need anything, just inbox, find me on LinkedIn. I'll be there probably later tonight as well because I live there. If not, I will see you somewhere soon. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. Thank you, thank you, thank you.